Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another Hasbro Jurassic World figure, and not just any Hasbro figure. This one was actually requested for a review. This is the Stegoceratops, and I always thought it was quite humorous as far as this figure goes, that it was part of the main line of Jurassic World. I think that leg's in a bad spot. There we go. The main line of Jurassic World, and not meant to be a hybrid, but it's very clearly a hybrid. Like when they came out with the Dino Hybrids line, they took this figure and somehow made this even more of a hybrid for that line. Like they could have just re-released this figure maybe in a new paint scheme, which I mean they're pretty close to that is what they did, but they did alter it a little bit. And it was still a hybrid, so it's weird that they marketed it that way, where it kind of almost didn't mean to be a hybrid, or at least they weren't making it look like it is, but it very, very much so is, because the hybrid line, they had to take the hybrid and make it more of a hybrid, but they did the same thing with the Indominus Rex as well. But you can see the figures pretty interesting. I actually don't absolutely despise this figure, even though obviously it's not the greatest figure out there, but it at least sports some okay looking detail to it. So as always, let's jump to a closer look and we'll check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Stegoceratops, you can see again the detail here in the face isn't half bad. I think the skin texture looks okay. It's definitely a little muted in some areas, like as you lead back here closer to the horn, you can see it's not all that vibrant, and it's a little washed out in some spots, but it doesn't look terrible. And I think the overall likeness, as far as the way that Stegoceratops is kind of portrayed in the Jurassic franchise, is pretty decent. And it's one thing that I always felt was really strange about the Stegoceratops, is that it's a mixture of a Triceratops and a Stegosaurus, but it looks so much more like a Nasutoceratops, and you can definitely see that here, especially with the positioning of the horns and the overall snout, and everything looks so much more Nasutoceratops than Triceratops. But you can see we've got the beak sculpted out here. Not really anything in the way of detail on the beak, but it is painted with a brownish tone. It's the same brown you actually see for the horns, and just like the beak, not really anything going on detail-wise in the horns, but the paintwork looks okay. There's a little bit of extra paintwork here running along the snout. I don't know if that's sloppiness or if that was supposed to be there. I don't really remember at this point. But as you lead up here into the frill, you can see again some decent looking scale detail and stuff popping up. You can also see we've got some more brownish tones nicely applied actually right there in the frill. And all of the spikes leading around the frill are painted. So you do have to give credit where credit's due. The paintwork on this isn't terrible, or at least not so far. But you can see the eyes are painted pretty nicely as well. You've got like a black tone around the eye that helps to highlight the yellow eye, and a black pupil for the eyes. They're also really small and actually pretty decently painted. You know, they're fairly precise overall. We can see the nostrils right there. You can also see that the head keeps moving back and forth. That's part of the action feature for the figure. The rear side of the frill as well looks okay, I guess. As you move back into the body, this is where the detail starts to look kind of generic. I think in the head sculpt it looks pretty decent, but as you move back into the body, you can see it looks a lot more, I'm not really sure. I guess generic would be the way I'd put it. Maybe just really washed out, and there's not much in the way of fine detail. Like, it very much so reminds me of the Terra by Batat light and sound figures they had released, where you can see that there was originally some decent detail to the figure, but somehow once you transfer the detail from the original sculpt to the figure itself, it doesn't look so great anymore. You can also see as far as the plates here on the back, which do look pretty decent. Like you can see there's some nice detail in those cracks and crevices and stuff throughout, but you can see it's applied with a separate piece, and the seam is as obvious as it could possibly get. There was not even a slight attempt at hiding that, and it's not the end of the world considering it's an articulated figure and stuff. You're going to find seams, but that is just an overly ugly seam right there. You can see that we also have some osteoderms moving through and stuff. Up here in the plates, as I mentioned again, they are sculpted nicely, but they also do feature some extra paintwork, as you have the green running up the center of the plates and then a brown that outlines the outer edges of the plates, and you can see that runs the entire course of the figure there all the way out toward the tail. You do have an area of dino damage on your Stegoceratops, and you can see the ribs are actually of course, sculpted out, but painted in there as well. And then you have a pinkish tone for the blood and guts area of the Stegoceratops. Also some nice tears in the stomach region. And with an injury like that, I think this Stegoceratops is pretty much doomed. But as you move down into the legs, the detail does kind of return in a little bit more of an impressive fashion. Again, up here, super washed out, but down here in the legs, it looks a lot nicer, definitely more vibrant. For some reason, the entire figure has kind of a satin shine to it outside of the plates. I don't think the plates really do, but the rest of the figure is very shiny, which is weird. The head kind of has it a little bit, but not near as much as the legs, and specifically this front leg is really shiny. But as you move down into the foot sculpt, that as well looks okay. You can see there isn't any paintwork for the nails, but they are sculpted decently. As you move back into the rear leg, we do have the Jurassic World stamp here. Again, kind of playing off of the Kenner figures with the JP stamp. You have a Jurassic World stamp on these. You can also see, again, some decent looking detail, a little bit of muscle definition, but some nice skin detail. As you move down, you've got the knee, the calf muscle as well, and then another foot sculpt here. Again, it looks all right. You've got the nails sculpted yet again, no paintwork for that area, but some nice creasing and stuff in the ankle. And then as you move up, you've got another super obvious seam as you lead out here into the tail. Again, that's another area where the action feature basically is taking place, and you have a little bit of a curve to the tail as you lead out, and then some thagomizers out here at the end of the tail, which do actually have a little bit of detail. Funny that the thagomizers have some cracks and crevices, but the horns on the head did not. Unfortunately, we don't have any actual paintwork for the thagomizers, and I find that to be kind of strange when you paint like the entire figure the whole way through. And yes, we do even have a lighter tone of brown here that starts under the neck and lower jaw and stuff here that runs through the course of the entire underside all the way out onto the tail, but we didn't paint the thagomizers, and I feel like that's at least like one area you would want to paint for this, but no dice. But as you can see, in typical Hasbro fashion, we do have screw holes. We've got 4 of them, it looks like, on this figure. So you do have an ugly side and a more superior side for this one. You've also got this little area here where they put the information for the figure back here on the tail, which is also not in the most convenient spot. Definitely a little bit of an eyesore as far as that goes. You can see the only real differences over here outside of the screw holes and that stamp is the positioning of the legs. Obviously, the front leg is way stretched out further forward. This leg is a little bit more forward than the opposing leg, but that's really about it as far as difference goes from one side to the other. It's, again, not the greatest figure, and I don't know that you'll ever find a great figure in the Hasbro Jurassic World line, but it's one of the very few figures that I still feel like looks kind of okay in certain aspects and is probably one of the more fun releases that they had, but still not really too good. Now, as far as the articulation and everything goes for the figure, we can obviously see the head goes left and right. Not really much in the way of up and down, kind of. You can see the tail also does that. And as far as the articulation outside of the action feature area, you do have articulation in the legs. It is really quite stiff, but as you can see, that rear leg can move pretty nicely. That's as far forward as it goes, though. The front leg here does move pretty decently. I'm thinking same thing for this one. Yeah, same deal, and again, same deal for the rear leg. Pretty decent mobility in the legs of the figure. As far as the action feature goes, basically we can move the tail, and as you can see, the head moves, and it is like a striking action feature with the horns. Doesn't really have much force, doesn't really work that great. You would think you'd be able to do the opposite, basically move the head and the tail moves, but as you can see, it doesn't really do that. It's basically just the head. Maybe mine's just not working too well, or I just don't know how to operate it, I'm not sure. But you also can push the tail down, and it extends the head and neck, so as you can see, get from the side here, you can see how extended that neck goes. Once you push the tail down, it extends that neck out, so it's kind of like a striking action feature, but also almost makes your Stegoceratops look like a turtle, and I guess that works with the green colors that it has. So not the greatest action features, that's for sure. As far as the size goes, it's not very big. So for a length, if we go from the horn to the tail, about 7 inches or around 18 centimeters. And the highest point is definitely the tail, which is just a little hair over 4 inches or about 10.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our Stegoceratops. And you can see the Stegoceratops isn't much larger than like your average Attack Pack, Wild Pack sort of size range. It's definitely a good bit on the smaller side. Then for another size comparison, we have a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus next to the Stegoceratops to give you another idea of how small it is. And then one more comparison. I don't feel like we need too many for this figure. You can see next to the Borealopelta from Mattel, it's pretty close to the same size, just slightly larger when it comes to the Stegoceratops. Weird that a figure like this, a species like this, would be so small, but obviously Hasbro did not care at all when it came to not only the Jurassic line, but specifically the sizes of their figures, because the sizes were all over the place. And this is pretty surefire proof, I think, of the fact that they did not care at all about the size of this species for sure. So this Hasbro Jurassic World Stegoceratops is not so great. It's not terrible. I mean, it's not the worst that Hasbro has to offer, and I think that's one of the reasons why when it was requested for review, I was pretty eager to pull this one out and take a look at it with you guys, because it's for some reason one of the very few figures that I was always interested in, always kind of liked, and you know, actually pulling it out, I can say I think I like it a little less than I remember, but that's just because the detail in the body isn't quite as nice as it could be or should be. You know, you've got some decent skin texture in the face and out there on the legs and stuff, and even on the tail, I would say the detail looks pretty nice, and up in the plates also. But once you move into the primary body, it definitely starts to look pretty rough, and as a whole has a very muted and not so great look to it in the body itself. But again, like the legs and stuff and the plates and everything does have a pretty decent sculpt to it. The figure also, I think, looks fairly close to what you would expect to see for the Stegoceratops, but I still don't get the Triceratops part of this because, like I said, it looks a lot more like a Pseudoceratops to me. But the paintwork of this one is okay. You know, you do have paint from head to tail, and it does look pretty decent as far as that goes. No nail paint, and the fact that the Thagomisers are unpainted is a bit of a bummer, but it looks okay for what it is. And the injury on the side is painted, which is a plus as well. The articulation works fairly decently, and I would say for the most part when it comes to the legs and stuff of Hasbro figures, this one might have some of the most mobility in the legs themselves, because a lot of them are very, very limited. This one has a little bit more as far as like the ability to swivel the legs around, more so than many others do. But the action feature is kind of lackluster, doesn't work too well, and is pretty... I mean, it's what you would expect for a species like this, but I think it just doesn't work as great. Maybe as it once did. I don't know if it ever worked any better, but mine specifically isn't working too great. Doesn't really have much force, and it just generally doesn't operate that well. This figure did, of course, return in a different color scheme. I think there's a brownish one. And then, of course, there's also the Dino Hybrids version, which is the same figure, but just like enhanced and a little bit different. So there are different variations of it. If you'd like to see the reviews of the other variations, I can, of course, pull those out at some point. I actually don't have the Dino Hybrids version, but I do have the brown version of this. But I'm going to have to get a hold of that Dino Hybrids one at some point soon, not only to add to my collection, but so I can get a review for you guys. So let me know in the comment section what you think of this. If you want to grab one, of course, head to eBay, because long discontinued means you've got to resort to third-party sellers or somebody just selling off part of their collection and grabbing it from somewhere like eBay, Mercari, something like that. So make sure you do that, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.